The night does not rush you. It never has. Somewhere beyond the thin walls of this moment, the world is slowing traffic, thinning into distant murmurs, lights dimming one by one, thoughts loosening their grip. Tonight asks nothing of you. There is nothing you need to solve, nothing you must remember, nothing that requires your attention. You are allowed to simply be here. Imagine a room softened by shadows. The light is low, not absent, just enough to suggest shapes rather than define them. Fabrics rest quietly, holding warmth. Air moves gently, almost imperceptibly, like a careful breath taken by the night itself. This is a safe hour, a private one. An hour when even history speaks in whispers. And it is in this hour, this gentle folding of time, that our story begins. Before we drift deeper into tonight's gentle journey, remember to subscribe to Tedious History for Sleep. Here, you'll always find peaceful stories that soothe the heart and quiet the mind. Where are you listening from tonight? Leave a comment. Your presence adds warmth to this quiet corner of the night. Now, let your shoulders rest a little lower. Your jaw can soften. Your breath can lengthen. You don't need to hold on to anything that follows. You don't need to remember this. Long before clocks measured minutes, before calendars divided years, humans learned to recognize this hour, the moment when the sky darkened enough to reveal what had always been there. Above them stretched an endless field of quiet lights, steady and patient, waiting to be noticed. In those early nights, there were no names for constellations yet, no maps, no explanations. Only the feeling shared across generations that looking upward brought a strange calm. As if the vastness above made the worries below feel smaller, lighter, more manageable. In many ancient settlements, evenings ended the same way. Fires burned low. Voices softened. Someone stepped outside, not for any particular reason, but simply because the night invited them. Cool air brushed against skin. The ground held the day's remaining warmth. And overhead, the sky opened. It was here beneath these early stars that humanity's first quiet questions formed, not loud questions. Not urgent ones, but gentle wondering. Who are we? Where did we come from? Why does the sky feel so close and so far away all at once? Across ancient Mesopotamia, people recorded the movements of the heavens on clay tablets, not to control them, not to conquer them, but to remember them. Each mark pressed into clay was an act of attention, a way of saying, I was here, and I noticed. In Egypt, nights along the Nile were filled with reflections. Water mirrored stars so clearly that the boundary between sky and earth seemed to dissolve. Priests and observers believed the heavens were not separate from human life, but woven into it, guiding seasons, rituals, and the quiet rhythm of days passing. In China, court astronomers kept watch through long, silent hours. Their work was not dramatic. It required patience, repetition, and trust in slow change. Night after night, they returned to the same position, the same view, allowing the sky to reveal itself over time. And in Greece, philosophers spoke softly beneath the stars, not as teachers delivering answers, but as listeners forming thoughts aloud. They believed that curiosity itself was a virtue, not the kind that demands resolution, but the kind that rests comfortably inside not knowing. What connects these distant places is not technology or belief, but temperament. A shared willingness to sit with mystery, to let questions remain open, to observe without forcing meaning too quickly. Perhaps you felt this yourself. Maybe there was a moment years ago, or not so long ago, when you looked up at the night sky and felt something loosen inside you, a quiet relief. A sense that you did not need to have everything figured out, that simply noticing was enough. If that memory comes to you now, you don't need to hold it tightly. Let it pass like a slow-moving cloud. As centuries unfolded, humanity began to leave behind gentle traces of these nighttime rituals. Stone circles aligned with solstices. Simple markers that pointed toward rising stars. Structures built not for spectacle, but for alignment between earth, sky, and human attention. These were not places of urgency. They were places of waiting. waiting for light, waiting for shadow, waiting for the slow certainty of celestial return. And still, beneath all the observation and recording, the same calm curiosity remained. A quiet acceptance that some truths arrive only through patience. That understanding does not always come from effort, but from presence. The stars did not rush, so neither did the people who watched them. Tonight, you are part of that same long lineage. You are listening in the same spirit with no demand placed upon you. No test at the end. No conclusion required. Just the gentle unfolding of a story offered slowly, like starlight traveling vast distances to reach you exactly when it's ready. As this journey continues, we will move gently through ancient nights and thoughtful silences. We will follow humanity's soft footsteps as they learn to sit with curiosity rather than fear it. And we will do so without urgency, without sharp turns, only smooth transitions, like waves settling onto a quiet shore. For now, let the image of the night sky linger. Let it stretch wide and calm above you. Let your breathing fall into its rhythm. When was the last time you looked up at the night sky and felt at peace? You don't need to answer. The night already knows. The night deepens not by moving forward, but by settling inward, as if time itself has chosen to rest rather than advance. Above you, the sky remains unchanged, patient, expansive, unconcerned, while below it, somewhere in the long memory of humanity, there exists a room held quietly by history. It is not a grand hall meant to impress, nor a place of ceremony or importance, but a room designed to be lived in slowly. Its walls are thick and reassuring, built to keep the sharp edges of the outside world at a distance. Light enters only when invited, filtered through heavy curtains and softened by layers of fabric that have known many seasons. The glow within does not flicker brightly. Instead, it hums gently, steady, and warm, like a thought that does not need to arrive anywhere in particular. In this room, time behaves differently, loosening its grip, allowing moments to stretch and breathe. Near a window stands a chair, its wooden arms smoothed by years of quiet use. A small table beside it holds a few personal objects, nothing extravagant, nothing chosen for display. Perhaps a book with pages worn thin at the edges, opened and closed countless times without urgency. A folded piece of cloth, kept not for its material value but for the memory it carries. An object that once belonged to someone else, preserved simply because it feels right to keep it close. Across centuries, rooms like this have existed everywhere, shaped not by fashion but by need. In medieval Europe, evenings gathered families into tight, protective spaces where firelight moved softly across stone walls. Outside, uncertainty lingered in the dark, but inside, the night offered a pause from the demands of survival. Voices lowered, movements slowed, and silence was shared without discomfort. In ancient Japan, sliding doors softened the boundaries between rooms, allowing shadows to drift gently from one space to another while paper lanterns glowed low, designed not to banish darkness but to live alongside it. Night was not something to resist, but something to enter with respect. In the Middle East, inner courtyards collected cool air after sunset, and fountains whispered the same small sound again and again, as if reminding everyone present that nothing urgent was required of them. These spaces were not built for productivity. They were built for rest, and rest, across history, has always been an intimate act. As night settled, people removed the layers of the day-heavy garments. Formal expressions, guarded thoughts, and what remained was softer and more honest, a version of the self that did not need to perform. It was in these hours that curiosity often arrived, not as a demand for answers, but as a quiet presence, drifting in like a familiar guest. Thoughts about the body, about feelings that had no clear language, about sensations experienced, but rarely spoken aloud, surfaced gently without insistence. People noticed patterns without naming them. They noticed how breath slowed as rooms grew darker, how the body responded differently to stillness than to daylight movement, how certain thoughts appeared only when no one else was watching. History rarely records these moments directly, not because they were unimportant, but because they were too private and too ordinary. They lived instead in habits passed quietly from one generation to the next, woven into the fabric of daily life. In many cultures, nighttime was believed to be closer to truth, not because it revealed answers, but because it removed distractions. Without the noise of obligation, the mind wandered more freely, gently, sometimes without direction. There was no need to name everything that arose, and people trusted that thoughts could exist without explanation. A woman in ancient Rome might sit by an oil lamp, slowly unpinning her hair, feeling the weight of the day fall away strand by strand without analyzing the sensation. History here is not a teacher. It is a companion sitting beside you without speaking, offering only its presence. And presence, as humans have always known, can be deeply comforting. This is why stories were told at night, not to inform, but to soothe, to remind listeners that they were not alone in their thoughts, that others long before them had wondered quietly about the same things. That curiosity itself was not dangerous, but natural and human. As this journey continues, we will move gently outward from this room and its intimate stillness into the broader flow of human life, following these quiet questions as they traveled through belief systems, rituals, and traditions never shouted and never forced, only carried. For now, allow the room to hold you. Feel how the walls protect rather than close in, how the dim light softens rather than obscures, how the silence feels full rather than empty. Let your breathing slow a little more, and allow the edges of the room to fade gently. There is nowhere else you need to go just yet. As the room slowly recedes into the background, not disappearing, but simply becoming less defined, attention drifts outward in the same unhurried way it always has. This is how curiosity moves at night, not leaping forward, not demanding clarity, but unfolding gently, like a thought that stretches and settles before finding its shape. Long before curiosity became something to pursue or satisfy, it existed simply as a quiet companion to human life, especially in the hours when the world softened and expectations fell away. In early human communities, curiosity rarely announced itself. It lived inside routine, hidden within familiar gestures. People rose with the sun, worked until the light shifted, and returned home as shadows lengthened. The day belonged to necessity, but the evening belonged to reflection. When hands were finally still, when voices grew tired, small questions had room to breathe. They were not urgent questions. They did not require answers before morning. They were questions that existed comfortably alongside the unknown. Around ancient hearths, people noticed the body's subtle signals. How warmth spread slowly from fire to skin. How stillness brought awareness to sensations ignored during the day. How emotions softened when no one was watching closely. These observations were not recorded, debated, or categorized. They were simply felt, then carried quietly into the next day and the next generation. In many early belief systems, curiosity was never separated from nature. Curiosity was not about breaking rules or crossing boundaries. It was about noticing patterns, sensing connections, and wondering gently where one fit within them. People trusted that not all curiosity needed to be resolved. Some of it could simply exist, like the stars themselves, present, steady, and beyond reach. In ancient India, thinkers spoke of the body and mind as interconnected, not opposing forces. Evening practices focused on stillness and awareness rather than control. Breath became something to observe, not manage. Sensation was acknowledged without judgment. Curiosity here was inward-facing, quiet, and deeply personal, allowed to rise and fall without explanation. In indigenous cultures across the Americas, night was often associated with listening. Elders told stories not to instruct directly, but to offer images that could settle into the listener's own experience. Monks observed how the mind behaved when distractions were removed, how questions softened when given time, how understanding sometimes arrived not through effort, but through rest. This gentle relationship with curiosity extended into daily domestic life as well. In households across centuries, nighttime routines repeated with little variation. Candles were extinguished one by one, doors were closed carefully. The body learned these sequences so well that they no longer required thought. And within that familiarity, curiosity found safety. It could emerge quietly, unchallenged by urgency. People wondered about their place in the world, about the nature of feeling, about experiences that had no shared language. They did not seek permission to wonder, nor did they feel compelled to explain themselves. Curiosity was not an action. It was a state of being. Perhaps this is why, even now, curiosity feels different at night. During the day, curiosity can feel sharp, demanding answers, pushing forward. But at night, it softens. It becomes less about knowing and more about noticing. Less about progress and more about presence. If you find your thoughts drifting now, that is not distraction. That is the natural rhythm of nighttime curiosity. Thoughts appear, linger briefly, then move on without resolution. There is no need to follow them, no need to organize them. They can exist without purpose, just as they always have. Across history, people trusted this process. They trusted that unanswered questions would not harm them. That curiosity, when allowed to move slowly, would settle on its own. That rest did not require closure. As the centuries continued to turn, curiosity quietly shaped traditions, rituals, and beliefs, not through force, but through repetition. What was once a private sensation became a shared understanding, passed along subtly rather than declared openly. And still, it remained gentle, never demanding more than attention. This is the kind of curiosity we follow, not the kind that pulls you forward, but the kind that allows you to sink deeper into stillness. It is a curiosity that does not interrupt rest, but supports it. One that feels less like a question and more like a quiet awareness of being alive in this moment. As the night continues, we will move further into this soft landscape of human experience, where history unfolds not through events and dates, but through sensations and rhythms that repeat across time. For now, let curiosity rest beside you, calm and unhurried, with no need to speak. Let your breathing remain slow and steady. Let your thoughts drift as they wish. Nothing here requires your attention, only your presence. As curiosity settles into a comfortable silence, attention drifts naturally toward the small, repeated actions that once filled ordinary nights. History often remembers great events, but most human life unfolded in these quieter spaces, shaped by habits so familiar they rarely earned names. Night after night, across centuries, people returned to the same gentle routines, trusting their steadiness to guide the body and mind toward rest. In homes lit by fire or oil, the evening followed a rhythm that barely changed. Tools were set aside carefully, placed where hands would find them again at dawn. Clothing was folded or hung without ceremony. Water was poured slowly, not out of necessity, but as a final gesture of care before the night deepened. These actions were not performed with intention or symbolism. They were simply known, learned through repetition until the body carried them out on its own. In ancient households along the Mediterranean, kitchens cooled as cooking ended, and the scent of warm bread or herbs lingered softly in the air. Families gathered not to discuss the day in detail, but to sit together in shared quiet. Someone might hum absent-mindedly. Someone else might stare into the fading glow of embers, watching sparks rise and disappear. Conversation, if it appeared at all, moved slowly and without direction. In northern regions, where nights grew long and dark for much of the year, evening practices emphasized enclosure and warmth. Heavy fabrics were drawn closer. Fires were banked carefully to last through the night. The sound of wind outside became a constant presence, something to be acknowledged and then ignored. Within these protected spaces, people learned to associate darkness not with danger, but with safety. In warmer climates, nights unfolded outward rather than inward. Courtyards became gathering places, roofs transformed into sleeping spaces, and the sky remained part of daily life even after sunset. People lay beneath the stars, bodies aligned with the earth, listening to insects and distant water. Sleep came gradually, guided by the steady rhythm of the night rather than by command. Across all these places, the body learned to recognize the signals of rest. Muscles released when familiar sounds appeared. Breathing slowed as light dimmed. Thoughts softened as the day's structure dissolved. These changes were not noticed consciously. They simply happened night after night until rest became an instinct rather than a task. Within these routines, people sometimes encountered moments of gentle awareness. A pause before sleep when the body felt especially heavy or especially light. A fleeting sense of connection to the room, to the earth beneath it, to the countless nights that had come before. These moments were not interpreted or discussed. They passed quietly, leaving behind only a subtle sense of calm. In many traditions, nighttime practices carried an unspoken understanding that the body holds knowledge beyond language. Evening rituals respected this by avoiding excess explanation. Rather than analyzing sensation, people allowed it to exist. Rather than seeking clarity, they welcomed ambiguity. Rest was not something to earn. It was something to receive. This attitude shaped how people related to their own thoughts at night. Worries were acknowledged without engagement. Memories surfaced and faded without judgment. Curiosity remained present, but it no longer searched. It observed, then rested. In monastic settings, the final hours of the day were marked by deliberate simplicity. Candles were extinguished methodically. Words grew sparse. Silence was not empty, but full, carrying the weight of shared presence. The body learned that nothing further was required, that the day's questions could remain unanswered until morning or longer. In domestic spaces, children learned these rhythms by watching adults. They learned when voices softened, when movements slowed, when lights dimmed. Over time, these cues shaped their own internal sense of timing. The body recognized night not as an absence of activity, but as a different mode of being. As centuries passed and technologies changed, These practices adapted without losing their essence. Gas lamps replaced candles. Electric light replaced flame. But the instinct remained to lower brightness, to reduce noise, to narrow focus. Even as nights grew brighter and busier, the body continued to respond to subtle cues of rest when allowed. Perhaps this is why certain sounds still soothe so easily: the hum of a fan, the distant murmur of traffic, the soft repetition of rain. They echo older rhythms, older nights, when sound signaled safety rather than urgency. The body remembers these patterns, even when the mind does not. If you notice such sounds around you now, there is no need to identify them. Let them blend into the background, becoming part of the steady atmosphere of the night. Let your body respond as it knows how. The quiet practices of ordinary nights were never about achieving sleep quickly. They were about creating conditions where sleep could arrive naturally, without force. By repeating familiar actions, people reassured themselves that the world was stable, predictable, and safe enough to release control. This reassurance did not come from certainty, but from continuity. Night followed day, rest followed effort. Questions followed silence, and then gently sleep followed everything else. As we continue this journey, we will move deeper into the ways these nightly rhythms shaped belief, tradition, and understanding over time. We will see how rest itself became a quiet teacher, guiding humanity toward patience and acceptance. For now, let these ordinary nights surround you. Let their familiarity settle into your body. Let your breathing find its own pace, unhurried and steady. Nothing needs to change. Nothing needs to be completed. The night is doing its work. As ordinary nights repeated themselves, gently and without announcement, something subtle began to take shape in the human mind. Time, once experienced as a simple passage from light to dark and back again, slowly began to feel less like a straight line and more like a circle. This was not an idea written down or explained aloud. It was a feeling, absorbed quietly through repetition, through the steady return of evening and the promise of morning. For early societies, the night was not an interruption of life, but a continuation of it in a different form. What could not be done in daylight waited patiently. What could not be spoken during the day found room in silence. Over many generations, people learned that not everything needed resolution right away. Some things returned on their own, changed slightly, softened by time. Agricultural communities felt this rhythm deeply. Fields rested at night just as bodies did. The land, dark and quiet, was not considered empty but dormant, holding energy for the coming day. This understanding shaped how people related to effort and rest. Work was intense but temporary. Rest was not a reward but a necessity woven into the cycle itself. In these cultures, the passage of time was marked less by numbers and more by sensation. The length of shadows, the cooling of air, the way the night sounded different depending on the season. People trusted these signals more than any abstract measure. Time was something felt, not tracked. In ancient calendars, cycles mattered more than dates. Lunar months guided rituals. Seasonal returns shaped festivals and periods of reflection. Night played a central role in this rhythm, serving as the space between doing and becoming. It was in the dark that transitions occurred, quietly and without spectacle. This sense of circular time influenced how people thought about memory as well. Memories did not belong only to the past. They resurfaced naturally, often at night, when the mind loosened its grip on the present. A familiar smell, a particular quality of silence. The sound of wind moving through trees could bring a distant moment close again. Not sharply, but gently, like something returning home. People did not resist this movement. They understood without needing to articulate it that life moved forward precisely because it was allowed to pause. This understanding brought comfort during uncertain periods. When days felt difficult or unclear, the return of night offered reassurance. No matter what remained unfinished, night would arrive, and with it the chance to step out of linear time and into something softer. As this journey continues, we will explore how this gentle relationship with time influenced beliefs about destiny, meaning, and the place of the individual within the larger flow of existence. We will see how night became a space not just for rest, but for quiet acceptance. For now, let time feel wide and forgiving. Let it circle around you without pressure. Let the night hold this moment, complete just as it is. Your body already understands how to rest within it. As time loosens its straight lines and begins to curve softly around the night, attention naturally lifts upward, toward the sky that has watched over every generation in quiet continuity. Long before it was measured, named, or charted, the night sky served as a gentle mirror for human thought, reflecting not answers, but feelings, smallness, belonging, calm curiosity, and a sense of being held within something vast and patient. For early humans, the sky was not distant. It felt close enough to touch, close enough to listen. Without artificial light to soften its presence, stars appeared brighter, more numerous, more insistent in their quiet way. People lay on cool ground or sat beside dying fires, eyes drawn upward not out of intention but out of instinct. The sky invited attention simply by being there. What they felt was not awe in the dramatic sense, but a steady reassurance. The sky did not change quickly. Night after night, it returned with familiar patterns. Certain stars rose at expected times, certain shapes reappeared year after year. In a world filled with uncertainty, this repetition offered comfort. Something remained constant, even when everything else shifted. In many cultures, the sky became a shared reference point, a common experience that required no explanation. People did not need to agree on its meaning to feel its presence. It was enough to look up together or alone and feel the same quiet pull. The sky did not judge. It did not demand understanding. It allowed observation without expectation. In ancient navigation traditions, sailors trusted the stars not because they fully understood them, but because they were reliable. The sky offered guidance without urgency. It did not rush those who followed it. Instead, it encouraged patience, careful observation, and trust in slow movement. Journeys took as long as they took. The stars remained. For farmers, the sky signal changed gently. The position of certain constellations marked planting or harvest, but even these transitions were gradual. Nothing happened all at once. The sky taught people to watch, to wait, to accept that growth and rest followed their own rhythms. At night, away from the practical needs of day, the sky became something else entirely. It became a place where thoughts could expand without pressure. People wondered quietly about their place within it, not in search of importance, but in search of connection. The vastness above made personal concerns feel lighter, less urgent, more manageable. In many spiritual traditions, the sky was not imagined as a realm of reward or punishment, but as a symbol of continuity. It reminded people that they were part of something ongoing, something that existed before them and would continue after them. This awareness did not inspire fear. It inspired calm acceptance. Poets and storytellers often return to the sky at night, not to describe it in detail, but to use it as a backdrop for reflection. The sky did not compete for attention. It held space. Against its quiet presence, human thoughts felt allowed to unfold slowly, without needing to arrive at conclusions. Even in places where the sky was hidden by dense forests, narrow streets, or heavy cloud, its presence was still felt. The knowledge that it existed beyond view was enough. Night carried the suggestion of openness, of depth, of distance softened by familiarity. As centuries passed and artificial light brightened human environments, the sky grew less visible, but its influence did not disappear. People still felt drawn to moments when darkness returned, during power outages, in rural places, or simply by looking up between buildings. The old sensation resurfaced easily, as if waiting just beneath the surface. Perhaps this is why, even now, looking at the night sky can feel like a form of rest. Thoughts slow. Breathing deepens. Perspective shifts gently, without effort. The sky does not ask you to solve anything. It does not offer solutions. It simply reminds you that you are part of a much larger, calmer pattern. If you imagine the sky now, you do not need to picture it clearly. A sense of openness is enough. A feeling of space above you, wide and quiet, holding this moment without comment. Let that feeling settle. Across history, people trusted the sky not because it explained life, but because it made life feel less heavy. It allowed questions to exist without urgency. It allowed silence to feel meaningful. It allowed rest to feel natural. As this journey continues, we will follow how this quiet relationship with the sky influenced myths, rituals, and the way people understood their own inner worlds. We will see how looking outward often led to gentler ways of looking inward. For now, let the sky remain a soft presence. Let it mirror your stillness rather than your thoughts. Let it be wide enough to hold everything you are not trying to understand tonight. Your breathing can remain slow. Your body can remain at ease. The sky has always been here, and it is in no hurry. As the sky continues to hold its quiet watch, human attention, unhurried and gentle, drifts back down toward the stories told beneath it. These were not stories designed to conclude neatly or deliver clear answers. They were stories shaped by the night itself, open, wandering, and content to remain unfinished. In their softness, they mirrored the way people experienced life after the sun had set, when certainty loosened and meaning no longer needed sharp edges. Long before stories were written, they were spoken slowly, carried on breath and memory rather than ink. At night, voices lowered naturally, not out of secrecy but out of harmony with the surrounding stillness. Words were chosen for their rhythm as much as their meaning. Pauses mattered as much as sentences. Silence was allowed to sit between phrases, giving listeners space to drift in and out of attention without losing their place. These stories were rarely linear. A tale might begin in one place, wander into another, and then circle back without explanation. Listeners did not mind. They were not there to follow a plot. They were there to rest within the sound of a human voice. If attention drifted, it was not considered a failure. The story would still be there when the listener returned. In many cultures, nighttime storytelling was less about entertainment and more about companionship. The presence of a voice in the dark reassured listeners that they were not alone. Stories filled the quiet without overwhelming it. They occupied the space gently, like a small fire that warmed without demanding attention. Around ancient campfires, storytellers did not perform. They remembered. Each telling was slightly different, shaped by the mood of the night and the needs of those listening. Certain images returned again and again. A journey, a homecoming, a familiar landscape, but details shifted. The story lived, changed, and adapted, never fixed in one form. In households across centuries, bedtime stories for children followed a similar pattern. The ending was often less important than the telling itself. A story might trail off naturally as sleep arrived, left unfinished without concern. There was an unspoken understanding that completion was unnecessary. Rest was the true conclusion. Adults, too, found comfort in stories that did not resolve. Legends shared in quiet rooms, myths whispered during long nights, and personal memories spoken softly all carried this quality. They allowed listeners to enter a shared space without requiring interpretation or judgment. Meaning emerged slowly, if at all, and that was enough. As written language spread, stories gained permanence, but nighttime storytelling retained its gentle nature. Even when words were fixed on the page, readers approached them differently after dark. Reading at night was less about comprehension and more about atmosphere. Pages were turned slowly. Sentences were reread or skipped without concern. The mind absorbed tone rather than detail. Monks copying manuscripts by candlelight experienced this shift firsthand. During the day, their work was precise and disciplined. At night, reading became contemplative. Words were allowed to echo, ideas lingered. The act of reading itself became a form of rest, a way to accompany the mind as it slowed. In many traditions, stories told at night intentionally avoided clear moral conclusions. Rather than instructing, they suggested. Rather than explaining, they invited reflection. Listeners were trusted to take what they needed and leave the rest behind. This trust created a sense of safety, a feeling that one did not need to be alert or critical. Perhaps this is why certain stories feel especially comforting even now. Stories that wander. Stories that linger on atmosphere rather than action. Stories that repeat phrases, images, or themes gently, like a lullaby. They speak to a part of the mind that does not seek resolution, only presence. If you notice your attention drifting as you listen now, that is not a sign of disengagement. It is a sign that the story is doing what it has always done. It is creating a space where thought can loosen its grip, where imagination can move without direction, where rest can arrive without announcement. Across history, people understood this intuitively. They did not demand that stories keep them awake. They welcomed stories that allowed sleep to come quietly, slipping in between words. A story that carried someone into sleep was considered successful, not unfinished. As the night deepens, these old storytelling rhythms still apply. There is no expectation to remember what comes next. No need to anticipate an ending. The story is not moving toward something. It is simply moving, like the night itself, steady and unhurried. In the next part of our journey, we will explore how these gentle narratives shaped the way people understood themselves, not as fixed characters in a defined plot, but as participants in an ongoing, open-ended experience. We will see how living without clear endings brought a unique kind of peace. For now, let the idea of the unfinished story rest with you. Let it remind you that nothing in this moment needs closure, that rest does not require completion, that it is safe to let the story continue without your attention. Your breathing can slow even further, your thoughts can soften and fade. The story will remain, whether you are listening or already drifting elsewhere. As stories drift gently without endings, what remains is the pause itself, the space between moments where nothing needs to happen. Across cultures and centuries, people learned to recognize this pause not as emptiness, but as a place to rest. The night offered it freely, and human life slowly learned to follow its rhythm. During the day, time feels segmented. Tasks begin and end. Actions lead to results. But at night, these boundaries soften. The pause stretches. People sit without speaking. They lie awake without planning. They allow minutes to pass without measuring them. This shift is subtle, almost unnoticeable, yet deeply felt. In traditional societies, evenings were rarely rushed. After work was done, there was no urgency to fill the remaining hours. People remained close to one another in quiet ways, mending tools, preparing food for the next day, or simply resting. Conversation arose naturally, then faded again, without needing to be sustained. The pause did not mean inactivity. It meant unforced presence. Hands moved slowly. Thoughts wandered. Attention drifted between the outer world and the inner one. This gentle oscillation allowed the mind to settle into a calmer state, one that required no effort to maintain. Many spiritual practices grew from this understanding. Meditation, prayer, and silent contemplation often took place at night or in low light. The pause was honored as a gateway, not to revelation, but to balance. Stillness was not a means to an end. It was the experience itself. In monasteries, periods of silence were built into daily life, especially after sunset. These hours were not empty. They were considered fertile ground for awareness. Without constant input, the mind naturally turned inward, noticing sensations, breath, and the simple fact of being present. In homes, the pause appeared in smaller forms. A candle burning after others had gone to sleep, a final glance out a window, a moment of stillness before lying down. These were not rituals with rules. They were habits shaped by intuition, passed down without instruction. Children sensed this pause instinctively. As night approached, their energy softened. Movements slowed. Voices quieted. They did not need to be told that it was time to rest. The environment itself communicated it: dim light, fewer sounds, the steady presence of adults who were no longer hurried. Even animals responded to this shift. Birds quiet. Insects change their rhythms. The world collectively exhales. Humans are part of this pattern, whether they notice it or not. The pause is not imposed. It emerges naturally when nothing interrupts it. In modern life, the pause is often interrupted by light and noise, yet it remains available. It appears in small windows late at night, early in the morning, or in moments of unexpected quiet. When it arrives, the body recognizes it immediately. Shoulders drop, breathing slows. The mind stops reaching outward. This recognition is not learned. It is remembered. The pause has always been familiar. It does not require practice. It only requires permission. If you are listening now, you may feel this pause beginning to surround you. Not as silence, but as spaciousness. A sense that nothing is expected of you. That you do not need to follow each word closely. That drifting is welcome. Across time, people trusted this pause. They did not try to control it or define it. They allowed it to hold them, the way night holds the landscape without altering it. In the pause, identity softened. People were not defined by roles or responsibilities. They were simply present. This state did not erase thought, but it changed its tone. Thoughts became quieter, slower, less insistent. They passed through like clouds rather than settling. There was no need to resolve them. They belonged to the pause, and the pause allowed them to come and go. As this part of the journey settles, there is nothing new to introduce. No insight to deliver. The pause does not offer lessons. It offers relief. It offers space. In the next part, we will gently explore how this way of resting inside the pause shaped ideas of home, belonging, and inner safety across cultures. We will see how stillness became associated not with absence, but with comfort. For now, let the pause remain exactly as it is, unnamed, unmeasured, unnecessary to explain. Your breathing can follow its own rhythm. Your body can rest into the surface beneath you. The pause will continue, whether you notice it or not. As the pause stretches and settles, it naturally gathers around the idea of home, not as a physical place alone, but as a feeling that emerges when the body and mind recognize safety. Across history, this sense of home was often felt most clearly at night, when movement slowed and the world grew smaller, quieter, and more familiar. In early human shelters, night transformed space. A simple dwelling became a boundary between warmth and cold, light and darkness, sound and silence. Inside, the fire burned lower. Shadows softened. The same walls that offered protection during storms now offered something gentler, enclosure without confinement. Home at night did not demand productivity. It did not ask for improvement or progress. It allowed people to simply remain. This permission was essential. Without it, rest would have felt uncertain, fragile. With it, rest could deepen naturally. Across cultures, the rituals of returning home in the evening carried this same tone. Shoes removed, tools set aside, voices lowered. These actions were not formalities. They were signals to the nervous system. The day was complete. Effort could pause. In many traditional homes, the central area where people gathered at night was modest and uncluttered. There was little need for decoration. Familiarity itself created comfort. Objects were known by touch and memory rather than appearance. This familiarity reduced the need for attention, allowing awareness to soften. Children learned the feeling of home through repetition. The same sounds each night. The same sequence of events. A predictable environment allowed their minds to release vigilance. Sleep followed easily, not because they were tired, but because they felt held. Adults, too, relied on this repetition. After long days, returning to a familiar space restored a sense of continuity. Even when life outside was uncertain, home at night remained steady. This steadiness did not solve problems. It simply reduced their weight. In many cultures, stories, meals, and quiet activities centered around the hearth or shared space in the evening. These gatherings were not loud or prolonged. They were gentle overlaps of presence. People did not need to entertain each other. Being together was enough. Over time, the idea of home expanded beyond walls. Certain sounds, scents, or routines came to carry the same sense of safety, the creak of a familiar floor, the distant sound of night insects, the steady breathing of someone nearby. These elements formed an emotional shelter that traveled with a person, even when they were far from where they slept. This is why, even now, rest can sometimes arrive unexpectedly triggered by a familiar rhythm or sensation rather than a location. The body remembers what home feels like, independent of place. In modern life, the boundary between day and night has blurred, yet the longing for this feeling remains. People recreated intentionally soft lighting, quiet music, repetitive routines. These are not luxuries. They are attempts to return to a state that once came naturally. Home, in this sense, is not something to be achieved. It is something to be allowed. When the environment communicates safety, the body responds without instruction. Muscles relax, breathing deepens, thought slows. As this journey continues, the concept of home will gently dissolve into something even more internal. We will explore how, over time, people learn to carry this sense of safety within themselves, independent of surroundings. For now, if you wish, you can imagine a place real or remembered where rest feels easy. It does not need detail. A general sense of warmth and enclosure is enough. Let that feeling settle without effort. Let it be incomplete. Let it feel familiar rather than vivid. Your body already understands this feeling. Your mind does not need to define it. Home, in this moment, is simply the absence of urgency. As the feeling of home softens and expands, it no longer remains tied to a single place. Across time, people slowly learned that the same sense of safety found in familiar walls could also be felt internally. This understanding did not arrive as an idea to be taught, but as an experience discovered through repetition night after night, pause after pause. When external noise faded, attention naturally turned inward, not in a searching way, but in a listening one. People noticed their breath without trying to change it. They felt the weight of their body supported by earth, floor, or bed. These sensations became reliable markers of safety, available anywhere. In this way, quiet became something that could be carried. Travelers resting far from home learned to recreate it through simple acts lying still, facing the same direction each night, listening for familiar rhythms. Over time, the body recognized these cues and responded with calm. Many contemplative traditions describe this shift without naming it directly. They speak of returning to oneself, of resting in awareness, of being present. Yet beneath the language, the experience is simple. The mind stops reaching outward. Attention settles. The sense of needing something dissolves. This inner quiet was never meant to replace the world. It existed alongside it, ready to be accessed when needed. People moved between action and rest naturally, without conflict. Night taught them how. Even in difficult circumstances, this quiet remained available. In unfamiliar places, during uncertainty, or in moments of solitude, people returned to the same internal signals: breath, stillness, the sensation of being supported. These were not techniques, they were memories the body held. Over generations, this understanding shaped ideas of resilience. Strength was not only the ability to endure effort, but also the ability to rest deeply. A person who could find quiet within themselves was less easily unsettled by external change. In stories and teachings, this quality was often described indirectly. Wise figures were portrayed as calm rather than powerful, steady rather than forceful. Their presence alone created ease in others. This ease came not from authority, but from familiarity with inner quiet. In daily life, ordinary people practiced this without naming it, sitting alone after others have gone to sleep, waking briefly in the night and returning easily to rest. These moments reinforced the body's trust in stillness. Modern life often interrupts this process, yet the capacity remains intact. It does not disappear. It waits. When given even a small opening, dim light, silence, stillness, it returns. If you are listening now, you may sense this quiet beginning to feel closer, less abstract. Not something you are moving toward, but something already present. It does not require effort to maintain. In fact, effort causes it to fade. There is nothing to concentrate on, nothing to hold. The quiet supports itself. As this journey approaches its final movements, the emphasis will shift away from history and tradition and toward the simple act of rest itself. The story has slowly done its work. Attention has softened. The body has recognized safety. In the next part, we will allow the words themselves to become fewer, lighter, and less necessary. The story will step further into the background, making space for sleep to arrive fully. For now, remain exactly as you are, breathing naturally, resting without intention. The quiet you are carrying does not belong to this story. It belongs to you. And now, even these words can begin to loosen. There is no need to follow them closely, no need to remember what has already been said. The story has gently done its work, not by leading you somewhere, but by allowing everything to slow on its own. Like a quiet light being dimmed, the presence of language can soften without disappearing all at once. If your attention drifts, let it drift. If a sentence fades before it finishes, let it fade. Nothing important is being missed. The rhythm of rest no longer depends on the sound of a voice. It has already settled deeper into the natural rise and fall of your breathing, into the steady weight of your body supported beneath you. There is no next moment you need to prepare for, no thought that requires completion. The night does not ask for awareness, it only offers space. And in that space, sleep can arrive gently, without signal or announcement. You may still hear words for a little while, or you may not. Either way is perfectly fine. The story no longer needs your attention. It will continue on its own, growing quieter, thinner, until it becomes part of the silence around you. Nothing needs to change. Nothing needs to be held. Nothing needs to be followed. Rest can take over now, naturally and easily, in the same way it always has, without effort, without instruction, without hurry. And when sleep comes, it will not interrupt anything. It will simply continue what has already begun.